Okay, we're looking at page 132. I'm going to give you, explain a little bit and give you a few definitions, and then I'm going to give you the answers for this page, and I think you should be okay. All right, the first graph that you'll see is this one. The thing to remember as you're reading this graph is that each one of these little images equals $2, not $1. So be careful when you're counting, all right? Also, there is a passage here to read with this graph. You'll find that you end up having to read it. Remember, we don't automatically read passages. We wait until we see from the questions that we have to, because not reading something we don't have to saves us time on the test, and we are taking a timed test. So you do end up having to read the passage here, so go ahead and read it. And let's see. For number 9, the answer is B. I want to explain the term in letter A, deflation. Inflation is when the price of products goes up, right? So if something cost $1 one year and it costs $1.50 the next year, there's been inflation in the price. The price has gone up. Deflation means the opposite. It means the price of something going down. So if something cost $1 one year and then it cost 75 cents the next year, there would have been a deflation in prices. Also, in letter B, you have the word inclement weather. That means bad weather. Inclement weather is bad weather. Number 10, the answer is C, like cat. And other than that, you should be okay. All right? All right, for the next graph, I didn't make a copy of it, but the next graph on page 132, thankfully, the little figure is a nice number. It's 1%, so it's easy to count stuff on this graph. And this is the percent of unemployment. You will have to read the passage. You'll end up having to read the passage for this, so you can go ahead and read it. In the passage, you see the term economic indicator. An economic indicator is something that tells us how the economy is going. It indicates for us whether the economy is doing well or doing badly. All right, and number 11, the answer is A. Number 12, the answer is D. In 12, the term downturn is used. A downturn in the economy means the economy gets worse. It's going all right, then it turns down. It's getting worse. Question number 13 uses the word upturn. Same thing, the economy's going along okay, and then it turns up, it's doing better. The answer is B for number 13. For number 13, the others experienced an upturn, but the sharpest, the biggest upturn was letter B, I think. Anyway, I may have said that wrong. Okay, now let's look at page 133. This is by far the most complicated pictograph we've looked at today. You will find that you have to read the passage. It talks about exports and imports and a trade balance. We see the title here, U.S. Trade with Japan in 1985, U.S. Trade with Japan in 2005. Each little figure equals 20 billion. Why can't they make it like 10 billion? Easier to count. Or 100 billion, easier to count. But each one equals 20 billion, so remember that when you're counting. And when we look at this, we see we have a zero line on these charts. And then again, we have these figures, deficit and surplus, deficit and surplus. So we find from the passage that a trade balance, ideally, if we're trading with Japan, we send them we export to them just as many products as they export to us. So we export stuff to them, we import things from them. We don't want to export more to them than we import, because then we've given them more than we've taken in. Or probably we don't want to do it the other way around. We don't want to import more from them than we export. Otherwise, we've spent more money than they have, right? All right, I think. Okay, so the trade balance, this says exports. How much did we export? How much did we import? And this trade balance down here should be the same as the difference between this and that. So if we look at this, about that big, that's how much that is. So in 1995, we sent them this amount of products. We bought from them this amount. So our deficit, our trade with them was in a deficit figure. We bought more than we sent them. And then in 2005, we sent them this much. We bought from them this much. Again, this figure here should be about the same as this. So subtract this, that. So again, our balance with them was in a deficit position because we bought more from them than we sent them. All right? All right, with that in mind, let's take a look at the questions. Number 14, based on these pictographs, which of the following statements is correct? The answer is C. The value of U.S. exports to Japan doubled between 1985, not 1995. It doubled. The value of exports. So we would count this and we would count that and see if this is double that. So each one of these is 20 billion. So we exported about 20 billion. We imported 20, 40, 60, and about 10 more. So 70. So the value of U.S. exports more than doubled, a little more than doubled between 1985 and 2005. All right, if we had achieved a trade balance, we wouldn't have a deficit. Both of those, this, and this would be the same size. This and this would be the same size. A balance would be we exported exactly as much as we imported. So nowhere on this chart is there a balance, right? A trade balance. So, and the U.S. imported about 40 billion in 1985. We'd have to count this. No, it's not 40. It's more like 60 or 70, right? And the value of U.S. imports from Japan changed only slightly. No, look, the imports went up quite a bit between here and there. So the only reasonable answer is C. 15. Which of the following describes the U.S. trade with Japan in 2005? Make sure we're looking at the right part of these charts. The trade deficit was more than 80 billion. So is this 20, 40, 60, 80? Yes, it's more than 80 billion. The other ones, if you count, remember each one's worth 50 billion, they won't, those other answers won't work. Number 16. How did trade between the U.S. and Japan change from 85 to 2005? The trade deficit grew by nearly 40 billion. So this went up about 40 billion there. That's the answer the workbook says is right. The value of exports increased more than the value of imports. You'd have to look at the difference between this and that and take the difference between this and that and see whether this difference was more than that difference, and it's not. C, the U.S. trade balance moved from a small surplus to a large deficit. There is no surplus anywhere on here, so that won't work. And D, the value of imports increased by about 20 billion. If you count the value of imports, that won't be right. Number 17, in which of the following ways might the U.S. government seek to change its 2005 trade balance with Japan? Okay, so the answers to this question we can't answer this question particularly from the information that we have here on this graph. We have to bring in a lot of outside knowledge about economics. So I'll just tell you that the answer is D here. But you can't really get that answer from this chart. It's a badly written question. You won't get a question that's written that badly, or that you can't deduce the answer from the graph on the GED or the HiSET. Okay? All right. Take a look at those. If you have questions, you can email me or wait and see me during the online session that we have tomorrow morning, or you can find me in chat. All right. Thanks for your attention.